Heave it. I want this rotting junk out of my sight immediately. The shrill command shattered the mournful silence of the hallway. I froze, my hand still resting on the cold brass doorknob. I had come to collect a few of my late son's favorite books, hoping to find some solace in his handwriting. Instead, I walked straight into a demolition of his memory. Inside the sprawling living room, two burly men in coveralls were roughly tilting the heavy, antique upright piano. Wood groaned against the floor, a sound that felt like a bone snapping in my own chest. "Stop!" I gasped, dropping my purse. I rushed forward, my usually composed demeanor cracking under the weight of grief and shock. "What are you doing?" "That is David's piano. It's been in our family for 3 generations." Jessica, my daughter-in-law, didn't even look up from her tablet. She was dressed in black, but the fabric was too tight, the neckline too low for a grieving widow. She swiped her finger across the screen, her face illuminated by the cold blue light. "Oh, you're here," Jessica said, her voice dripping with bored irritation. She turned the tablet toward me, shoving the screen into my face. "Look at this, Catherine. This is the evidence right here, the minimalist Zen staging package." On the screen was a 3D rendering of this very living room, stark, white, modern, and completely empty, but it was the date on the corner of the document that made my blood run cold. She had signed the contract with the realtor 3 days ago. While my son was taking his final breaths, she was already planning how to erase him. "The realtor says if we want top dollar, we need to declutter," she said, tapping the glass. "That dusty monstrosity is an eyesore. It smells like old people and failure. It smells like memories." My voice trembled, but I stood tall, channeling the dignity of my 40 years as an art curator. "Noah plays this piano. It is the only thing that calms him down when he has his episodes. You cannot sell it." "Watch me," Jessica scoffed. She scrolled to another document, a signed order with a junk removal header. "The house hits the market on Monday. I need cash, Catherine. Real cash, not sentimental garbage. David left me with nothing but this money pit of a house and a mountain of medical bills." That was a lie, and we both knew it. I had liquidated my own retirement fund to pay for David's experimental treatments, so Jessica wouldn't have to sell her jewelry. But I remained silent on that. I had no proof anymore, only an empty bank account. Suddenly, a small, terrified wail erupted from the top of the stairs. Noah, my 8-year-old grandson, stood trembling in his pajamas. His eyes were wide, fixed on the movers who were now wrapping huge plastic straps around the piano's legs. "No, no take," Noah whispered, rocking back and forth. He rushed down the stairs, ignoring his mother, and threw his small arms around the piano bench. He pressed his face against the scratched mahogany. "Daddy's music. Daddy's music. Get off, Noah," Jessica snapped, grabbing the boy by the back of his shirt and yanking him away with zero maternal tenderness. "Go to your room. Stop embarrassing me in front of the workers." "Let him go." I stepped in, pulling my grandson into a protective embrace. I could feel his heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Jessica dusted off her hands, looking at the movers. "Ignore the drama, just get it out. If it's not on the curb in 10 minutes, I'm not paying the removal fee." One of the movers, a large man with a sympathetic grimace, looked at me. "Ma'am, maybe we should wait?" "Move it," Jessica shrieked. "It's my house, my property, and that thing is trash." The sound of metal casters scraping against the hardwood floor was agonizing, like fingernails dragging across a chalkboard inside my skull. "Watch the floors! Watch the floors!" Jessica screeched, hovering over the movers like a nervous hawk. She wasn't looking at the piano, the instrument my son had learned his scales on. She was staring at the parquet. "If you scratch the finish, I'm deducting it from your pay." One of the movers, the older man with a gray beard, paused to wipe sweat from his forehead. He patted the side of the dusty instrument with a rough, calloused hand. "Lady, this thing weighs a ton. It's built like a tank. You sure you want to toss it? Even in this shape, the wood is solid. They don't make them like this anymore." "Did I ask for an appraisal?" Jessica snapped, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "It's big. It's ugly, and it clashes with my neutral color palette. I need this corner empty for the virtual tour video. The vibe I'm going for is modern serenity, not haunted antique shop." The mover exchanged a dry look with his partner. "Right, modern serenity. Got it." he muttered under his breath, clearly amused by the absurdity of standing in a house that felt as sterile as a dentist's waiting room. I stepped forward, my hands trembling slightly, not from age but from rage. Jessica, please, be reasonable. You know Noah struggles with changes in his environment. That piano is his safe space. It's his anchor. As if on cue, Noah was currently curled into a tight ball on the bottom step of the staircase, rocking back and forth. He was humming a low, discordant tune, his eyes fixed on the empty space where the piano used to stand. It broke my heart to see him so unmoored. Jessica sighed, a sound of exaggerated exhaustion. She walked over to her son, but instead of hugging him, she shoved a bright, rectangular tablet into his hands. Here, watch the colorful block game. It's better than banging on those noisy keys, she said dismissively. Noah didn't take the device. He slapped it away. It skidded across the floor, spinning to a stop near my feet. Noah, Jessica yelled, her face flushing red. Fine. Be miserable. See if I care. She turned back to me, her eyes narrowing into slits. You see this? He's acting out because you indulge him. You and David, always encouraging him with that old junk. It's not junk, I said, my voice firm despite the racing of my heart. I will take it. If you don't want it, give it to me. Jessica let out a short, cruel laugh. You, Catherine, you live in a one-bedroom apartment downtown. You can barely fit your own ego in there, let alone a grand, upright piano. How are you going to get it there? Carry it on your back? I'll find a way, I stammered. I mentally calculated the balance in my checking account. It was dangerously low, barely enough for rent and groceries. Jessica checked her watch, a flashy gold-colored timepiece. Well, you better think fast. The city bulk trash pickup comes tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. The movers are putting it on the curb right now. Once it's on the sidewalk, it's public property. Or public trash. She waved her hand dismissively at the movers. Get it out, and don't graze the doorframe. As the heavy instrument was shoved through the front door, leaving the house for the last time, I felt a wave of panic rising in my throat. I had less than 12 hours to save my son's legacy from the garbage crusher. I'm not leaving it, I whispered to myself, looking at Noah's tear-streaked face. I promise. Outside, the air was thick with humidity and the acrid smell of diesel fumes. A massive, rusted junk removal truck idled at the curb, its hydraulic compactor jaws open like a hungry beast waiting to be fed. The two movers hoisted the Steinway onto a dolly, preparing to roll it toward the truck's liftgate. No, don't hurt it. The scream was primal. Noah, who had managed to slip out the front door while Jessica was checking her makeup, sprinted across the lawn. He didn't run like a child playing tag. He ran like someone trying to save a life. He threw his small body against the side of the piano, wrapping his arms around the carved wooden leg. It's Daddy! It's Daddy! He sobbed, his face pressed against the dusty wood. Jessica stormed out of the house, her high heels clicking aggressively on the driveway pavers. She looked around frantically to see if the neighbors across the street, the ones with the perfectly manicured hedges, were watching. Noah, get away from that dirty thing immediately, she hissed, grabbing his arm. You look like a beggar. Get inside. I won't. Noah kicked his legs, his grip on the piano surprisingly strong. The driver of the junk truck, a burly man with a toothpick dancing between his lips, leaned out the window. He looked at the screaming kid, the furious mother, and me, the frantic grandmother standing helplessly in the driveway. He sighed loudly, clearly not paid enough for this suburban soap opera. Lady, we throwing this in or what? I got 3 more pickups, the driver yelled over the engine's rumble. Yes, take it. Jessica shouted, finally prying Noah's fingers loose. She dragged the weeping boy back toward the porch. Catherine, control your grandson or I'm calling the nanny to sedate him. I ignored her. I walked straight up to the driver's side of the truck. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might faint, but I forced myself to stand with the posture of a queen, even though I felt like a pauper. Sir, I said, my voice cutting through the noise, do not load that piano. The driver raised an eyebrow. Customer paid for removal, ma'am. Order says dispose. I am buying it, I said. I opened my worn leather handbag. My hands shook as I pulled out a small stack of bills, my grocery money for the next 2 weeks. This is $60. It's all I have on me. Please, just leave it on the curb. Don't crush it. The driver looked at the crumpled $20 bills in my delicate hand, then at the fancy house, and finally at the sobbing boy on the porch. He shook his head, muttering something about rich folks having no heart. "Fine," he grunted, snatching the money from my hand. He signaled to his partner. "Drop it here, Mike. Let's go." The movers unceremoniously shoved the piano off the dolly. It landed on the sidewalk with a heavy, hollow thud that made me wince. One of the casters snapped off, causing the instrument to list dangerously to the left. The truck roared away, spewing black smoke into the twilight. Jessica stood on the porch, smoothing her dress. "Great. Now there's a pile of garbage on the sidewalk. You have until tonight to move it, Catherine. If the homeowners association finds me, I'm sending the bill to you." She slammed the front door, the lock clicking shut with a sound of finality. I stood alone on the street, the evening wind picking up. I placed a hand on the scarred lid of the piano. It was heavy, broken, and abandoned, just like me. "Don't worry, David," I whispered to the wood. "Mom is here." Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low growl that matched the churning in my stomach. The sky, previously a bruised purple, suddenly opened up. Rain began to fall, cold, stinging sheets that soaked my silk blouse in seconds. I dialed the only number I knew by heart. "Arthur? It's Catherine. I need you. And I need that rusty beast you call a truck." 20 minutes later, a battered, faded red pickup truck sputtered around the corner, backfiring loudly enough to set off a car alarm nearby. Arthur Miller, my late husband's former law partner and our oldest friend, hopped out. At 70, Arthur looked like a retired wizard who had traded his robes for a grease-stained raincoat. "Catherine, my dear," Arthur groaned, clutching his lower back as he surveyed the scene. "When you said emergency, I brought my legal briefcase. I didn't know I needed a forklift certification." "It's David's piano," I said, wiping rain from my eyes. I pointed to the lopsided instrument sitting forlornly on the curb. "She threw it out, Arthur, like it was nothing." Arthur's playful expression vanished. He looked at the piano, then up at the dark windows of the mansion behind us. "That woman has a heart made of linoleum," he muttered. Getting the piano onto the truck bed was a tragicomedy of physics. Arthur lowered a metal ramp, and he attached a manual winch cable to the piano's leg. "On 3, Arthur grunted, cranking the winch handle. 1, 2, heave." It took 40 minutes of slipping on wet pavement, 2 very creative curse words from Arthur that I pretended not to hear, and the help of a confused pizza delivery boy, whom I bribed with $10, but we finally secured the beast onto the truck bed. The drive to my apartment was slow and nerve-wracking. Every pothole made the piano groan under the tarp. "My suspension is going to hate me," Arthur joked, trying to lighten the mood as the windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the storm. "But for David, I'd drive this heap into the ocean." My apartment was on the ground floor of a converted brownstone, small, cluttered with books, and smelling of lavender and old paper. It was a tight squeeze. The piano barely fit through the entryway, taking up half of my modest living room. It stood there, dripping wet, dominating the space like a shipwrecked vessel. Arthur collapsed onto my floral sofa, breathing hard. I think I just slipped a disc. Send the bill to Jessica." I handed him a towel, my hands lingering on the cold piano keys. "Thank you, Arthur. Truly, I don't know what I would have done." "Don't mention it," he wheezed, "but Catherine, what's the plan? You can't eat a piano, and that woman." Knock, knock, knock. The sound was frantic, barely audible over the hammering rain. I frowned, checking the wall clock. It was past 9 o'clock. Who could that be? I opened the door and gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Standing on my welcome mat was a small, shivering figure. Noah. He was soaked to the bone, his expensive pajamas clinging to his skin, mud caked on his knees. He wasn't wearing shoes. "Noah!" I cried, dropping to my knees to pull him inside. The boy didn't look at me. He pushed past me, walking straight into the living room. He went to the wet piano, sat on the floor beside it, and rested his head against the pedal box. "Safe," Noah whispered, his teeth chattering violently. "Safe now." The morning sun filtered through my sheer curtains, painting the small living room in stripes of gold and dust. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and clean, though the smell of damp wood still lingered in the apartment. I sat in my armchair, nursing a mug of black coffee, watching him. I hadn't slept much. I had spent hours drying the piano with my best bath towels and using a hairdryer on the low setting to chase away the dampness from the felts. Noah was already awake. He sat on the piano bench, his legs dangling, staring at the keys with intense concentration. He looked so small in one of David's old oversized t-shirts that I had kept in the back of my closet. "Play something for me, sweetie," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Wake the old girl up." Noah hesitated, then placed his small fingers on the keys. He started to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It was hesitant at first, but his timing was perfect, inheriting his father's ear. C-G-G. The melody floated through the room, warm and familiar. But when Noah reached the next phrase, his brow furrowed. F-E-E. He pressed the D key, but instead of a clear note, there was a dull, muffled thump. He pressed it again, harder. Thump. "It's sick," Noah announced, pulling his hands back as if the piano had bitten him. He looked at me with wide, worried eyes. "Grandma, the piano is sick, it won't sing." "Let me see." I set my coffee down and walked over to sit beside him. "Which one?" "This one. And this one." Noah pointed to a cluster of keys in the middle octave. I pressed them myself. They felt heavy, resistant, as if pushing against a dense weight rather than striking a string. The sound was dead, lacking the metallic shimmer of a vibrating wire. "Maybe the rain got into the action," I murmured, my curator's instinct kicking in. "Or maybe the movers knocked something loose." I stood up and unlatched the two clips on the sides of the piano's upper front panel. With a grunt of effort, it was heavier than I remembered, I lifted the wooden board away, exposing the complex skeleton of the instrument, the strings, the dampers, and the row of felt-covered hammers. "Whoa," Noah whispered, leaning in so close his nose almost touched the strings. "It looks like a robot skeleton." "It's called the action, Noah," I explained, peering closer and adjusting my reading glasses. I expected to see rust. I expected to see broken springs or water-swollen wood from the storm. Instead, I saw velvet. The hammers for the stuck keys weren't just covered in the standard white felt. They were wrapped in an additional layer of dark, dense fabric expertly tied with ultrafine wire. It looked deliberate, surgical, almost. "That's not right," I frowned. David was obsessive about this piano. He would never let a technician do a sloppy repair job like this. I reached in, my slender fingers touching the strange wrapping on one of the hammers. It wasn't soft like felt. It was hard. There was something solid hidden underneath the fabric. "Is it a secret?" Noah asked, looking up at me. My heart skipped a beat. I looked at the row of modified hammers. There were at least 20 of them, all in the middle register. "Yes, Noah," I whispered, a strange thrill running down my spine as I realized this wasn't damage. It was a message. "I think Daddy left us a puzzle." "Get me my sewing scissors, Noah, the small ones with the stork beak." Noah scrambled to the side table and retrieved the silver scissors. My hands, usually so steady when handling million-dollar canvases, were trembling. But as I held the scissors, professional curiosity took over, anchoring me. I carefully snipped the microwire binding the strange fabric around the hammer of the middle D key. I peeled back the layers of dark velvet. Clink! A small, dull, irregular pebble dropped onto the wooden keybed. It wasn't shiny. It looked like a piece of cloudy glass or rough quartz. Noah poked it with his finger, his face scrunching up. "It's a rock. Daddy broke the piano to hide a rock?" He looked disappointed. "That's silly." I picked up the stone, holding it up to the beam of sunlight streaming through the window. I gasped, the sound sucking the air out of the room. As an art curator, I had handled jewelry estates before. I knew that look. It was an uncut diamond, raw, unpolished, but massive, probably 4 carats. "Not a rock, Noah," I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. A seed for your future." I looked at the row of wrapped hammers. There were 20 of them. If each held a stone of this size, the calculation made my head spin. But there was more. My eyes drifted down to the bottom panel of the piano, the kickboard, near the pedals. It was slightly askew, sitting a fraction of an inch off-center. "Help me pull this board, honey," I said. Together, we popped the bottom panel loose. The space usually reserved for dust bunnies and lost guitar picks was packed with 3 long cylindrical tubes made of PVC pipe, capped tightly at both ends. I pulled one out. It was heavy. I unscrewed the cap and gently slid out a roll of yellowed heavy-gauge paper. I unrolled it on the floor, weighting the corners with coasters. It was a charcoal sketch, a chaotic, energetic drawing of a dancer in motion. To the untrained eye, it was a mess of lines. But I stopped breathing. I recognized the aggressive strokes, the signature interplay of light and shadow. "It's a Degas," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "These are the lost studio sketches. They went missing in the 90s. David, how did you—" "It looks like scribbles," Noah critiqued, tilting his head to the side. "I can draw better." "These scribbles are worth more than Jessica's entire house," I said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. Inside the last tube, tucked between two rolls of canvas, was a white envelope. On it, in David's neat, blocky handwriting, "For Mom and Noah." "Open when the music stops." I tore it open, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Mom, if you're reading this, two things have happened. I am gone, and Jessica has done exactly what I predicted. She threw away my piano. She never looked inside it, did she?" "She never looked inside me either. The business didn't fail, Mom. I sold my software patent 2 years ago quietly. I didn't want the money to disappear into her lifestyle or get frozen in a divorce battle. I didn't have the strength to fight while sick. I converted it into things that last. Art and carbon, things only you would appreciate. This is for Noah's therapy and your peace of mind. You are the curator of my life now. Don't let her take this from you. Love, David." Tears fell from my face, splashing onto the paper. I wasn't just holding a fortune, I was holding my son's final act of rebellion and love. "Grandma?" Noah patted my shoulder awkwardly. "Are you sad?" "No, baby," I wiped my eyes, a fierce fire igniting in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. "I'm not sad, I'm ready." News travels faster than light in a small town, especially when it involves millions of dollars. I had made exactly one phone call to the city museum's head appraiser, an old friend named Marcus. I only wanted a preliminary verification of the sketches. But Marcus, overwhelmed by the sight of the lost Degas via video call, had let out a shout of joy that must have alerted the entire department. By 5 p.m. the story was the lead segment on the local evening news. I sat on my sofa, Noah coloring quietly beside me, as the anchor beamed from the television screen. In a shocking twist of fate, a local grandmother has struck gold. Sources say a piano, discarded just yesterday by a suburban family, was found to contain lost masterpieces worth an estimated $5 million. I took a sip of tea, a grim smile touching my lips. I didn't need a crystal ball to know what was happening across town. I could vividly imagine Jessica sitting in her staged empty mansion, probably choking on her green detox juice as she watched the B-roll footage of my apartment building. I checked my watch. 3, 2, 1. Ding dong. It wasn't a polite ring. It was followed immediately by a desperate rhythmic pounding that rattled the doorframe. I exchanged a look with Noah. "Stay here, darling. Keep drawing. Don't worry about the noise." I walked to the door, smoothing my cardigan. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the performance of a lifetime. I opened the door. Jessica stood there, breathless, her hair slightly disheveled, as if she had driven with the windows down. She was holding a massive bouquet of white lilies, the kind they sell in buckets at the gas station. I could still see the orange price sticker on the plastic wrap. "Mom," Jessica cried out, her voice pitching up into a theatrical whine. She attempted to barge in, but I blocked the doorway with my body. "Jessica," I said coolly, not moving an inch. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Did you run out of things to throw away?" "Oh, stop it." She laughed nervously, her eyes darting over my shoulder, trying to peek into the living room. I was so worried about Noah. And you. I felt terrible about yesterday. Stress makes us do crazy things, doesn't it?" She shoved the cheap flowers toward my chest. "I brought these. Peace offering?" I didn't take the flowers. I crossed my arms, letting her hold the heavy bouquet until her smile started to twitch. "You kicked your son out in a thunderstorm," I said, my voice low and steady. "You called my husband's legacy rotting junk and threatened to call the police on me. You don't get to rewrite that with gas station lilies." Jessica's smile faltered. The greed flickered behind her eyes like a strobe light, struggling to stay hidden behind the mask of the concerned daughter-in-law. She dropped the act. "Cut the crap, Catherine," she snapped, tossing the flowers onto the welcome mat. "I saw the news. David hid assets in our marital property. That piano was in my house. By law, everything inside it belongs to me." "Is that so?" I raised an eyebrow, enjoying the desperation radiating off her like heat. Yes, she hissed, stepping closer, her perfume overpowering the scent of rain. Now, let me in. We need to discuss how we're going to split this. And by split, I mean I'm willing to give you 10% as a finder's fee. That's generous, considering you stole it from my curb. I let out a short, dry chuckle. Stole? I have a receipt, Jessica. A receipt for trash is not a contract for millions. Her voice rose to a shriek. I'm warning you, Catherine. Don't make me get ugly. I'm the mother of your grandson. Do you really want to go to war with me? I looked at the woman who had tormented my son for years. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I'm not going to war, Jessica, I said softly. I'm just finishing the one David started. You know what? Come in, I said, stepping aside with a sudden, eerie calmness that clearly unsettled her. Let's talk. Jessica blinked, surprised by my easy surrender. She smoothed her wind-blown hair, plastered on a victorious smirk, and strutted into my apartment. Her eyes immediately darted around the room like a radar scanner, ignoring the cozy walls lined with books and family photos. Her gaze landed greedily on the dining table, where the charcoal sketches were spread out. So these are them? Jessica reached out with a manicured hand to grab the nearest drawing. Don't touch, I snapped, my voice cracking like a whip. She froze, her hand hovering inches from the paper. Oil from your fingers will ruin the paper, I said, stepping closer. But I suppose you wouldn't know that. You only appreciate art if it matches your sofa pillows. Jessica retracted her hand, rolling her eyes. Oh, please, spare me the curator lecture. It's just paper, expensive paper. She turned her attention to the corner of the room. Noah, baby, come give mommy a hug. Noah was huddled behind the piano bench, clutching his knees to his chest. When Jessica stepped toward him, he let out a sharp, high-pitched whimper and scrambled backward, pressing himself flat against the wall. He didn't look at her like a son looks at a mother. He looked at her like a rabbit looks at a fox. Don't be dramatic, Noah, Jessica sighed, checking her reflection in my hallway mirror. Get your shoes on. We're leaving, and we're taking the rocks Grandma found. He is not going anywhere with you, I said, stepping physically between them. And neither are the assets. Jessica's face hardened. The mask of the grieving widow dropped completely, revealing the cold predator underneath. She dropped her heavy designer handbag onto my dining table with a thud that made the china rattle. Listen to me, you old bat, she hissed, invading my personal space. I've already called my lawyer. That piano was marital property. You obtained it through deception. If you don't hand over the diamonds and those drawings right now, I will bury you in so many lawsuits you'll be paying legal fees from your grave. I have a receipt, I repeated, my heart hammering against my ribs, but I kept my face like stone. A receipt for trash, Jessica screamed, losing her temper. Spittle flew from her lips. No judge will uphold a $60 sale for a $5 million estate. I will win. I always win. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice to a venomous whisper that made my blood run cold. And here's the kicker, Catherine. If you fight me, I will move. I'll take Noah so far away you'll need a telescope to see him. Maybe a boarding school in Switzerland? Or maybe I'll just block your number. Do you want to die alone, never seeing your grandson again? It was a low blow. The lowest. I felt the blood drain from my face. She knew exactly where to strike to cripple me. You wouldn't, I whispered. He needs stability. He needs me. I need the money, Jessica shrugged, checking her nails as if we were discussing the weather. Give me the collection, and I'll let you visit him on weekends. Maybe. If you're nice. She held out her hand, palm up. Choice is yours, Catherine. The fortune, or the boy? The room went silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock and Noah's ragged breathing behind me. Jessica smirked, thinking she had checkmated the old woman. But she was so focused on her victory, she didn't notice the bedroom door creaking open behind her. Actually, a deep, gravelly voice spoke from the shadows. She chooses both. Jessica spun around so fast she nearly tripped over her own heels. Arthur Miller limped out of my bedroom, holding a blue gel ice pack to his lower back with one hand and a sheaf of papers in the other. He wore wrinkled trousers and suspenders over an undershirt, looking more like a confused grandpa who had wandered in from a nap than a legal shark. Who the hell are you? Jessica demanded, though her voice wavered slightly. A squatter? I am the man who threw out his back hauling your garbage across town, Arthur groaned, lowering himself slowly and painfully onto a wooden chair. I am also the executor of David's estate, and you, young lady, are standing on extremely thin ice. Jessica scoffed, regaining her composure. Executor? David's will was probated years ago. I got everything. This is a joke. The will you probated was from before Noah was born, Arthur said calmly, adjusting his reading glasses on his nose. But the document found inside the piano tubes, that is a holographic will. Dated 6 months before David passed. It is perfectly legal in this state. He slid a photocopy across the table. Jessica snatched it up, her eyes scanning the page frantically. It says, Arthur recited from memory, leaning back, that all hidden assets, specifically the contents of his instrument, are to be placed in an irrevocable trust for Noah's medical care and education. So? I'm his mother. Jessica slammed the paper down, rattling the sketches. I control the trust. I'll decide how to spend it. Read paragraph 4, I said softly, feeling a surge of quiet strength. Arthur pointed a calloused finger at the clause. David was very specific. He anticipated friction. The trust is to be managed by the legal guardian of the child. However, there is a stipulation. If the surviving parent attempts to liquidate family heirlooms or shows demonstrable neglect, guardianship of the financial assets transfers immediately to the secondary trustee. That's me, I added. You can't prove neglect, Jessica shrieked, her face turning a blotchy red. I am a model mother. I feed him, I clothe him. Really? Arthur raised an eyebrow. Because I'm pretty sure demonstrable neglect includes forcing a special needs child into a thunderstorm and threatening to ship him off to boarding school just to blackmail his grandmother, which, by the way, I recorded on my phone while standing in the hallway. He tapped the breast pocket of his shirt, where the rectangular outline of his phone was visible. Jessica paled. She looked from Arthur to me, and finally to Noah. My grandson wasn't looking at her. He was drawing a picture of a piano with wings. But the piano, she stammered, grasping at straws. It was in my house. You can't just keep it. That's theft. Arthur pulled out one final piece of paper. It was pink, the carbon copy of the junk removal invoice she had waved in my face yesterday. This is the waiver of ownership you signed, Arthur said, holding it up like a trophy. Clause 7. Customer acknowledges that all items removed are deemed abandoned and transfer ownership to the hauling company immediately upon removal. The hauling company then sold it to Catherine. She has the receipt. The room fell silent. The ticking clock seemed to boom like a gavel. You threw it away, Jessica, I said, stepping forward. You didn't just throw away wood and wire. You threw away David's love. You threw away Noah's future. You assumed it was trash because you only see value in things that shine on the outside. Jessica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at the drawings on the table, worth millions, and realized she had signed them away for the price of a junk truck rental. Now, Arthur checked his watch. I believe you're trespassing. I'd suggest you leave before I call the sheriff. My back hurts, and I have zero patience left for predators. 12 months later, the sunlight streaming into the David Vane Community Art Center felt different. It wasn't the cold, filtered light of Jessica's staged mansion. It was warm, unfiltered, and alive with dust motes dancing to the music. The center, a converted brick warehouse with high ceilings and terrible acoustics that I had lovingly fixed, was packed. Parents, neighbors, and local artists sat on folding chairs, their eyes fixed on the low stage. At the center of the stage stood the Steinway. It had been cleaned and tuned, but I had refused to refinish the exterior. The deep scratches, the water stains from that rainy night, the chip on the leg where the movers had dropped it, I kept them all. They were battle scars. They were part of its story. Arthur sat in the front row, wearing a much nicer suit this time. He leaned over to me, whispering, "You know, my back still twinges whenever I look at that heavy beast." I smiled, patting his hand. "Hush, Arthur. The show is starting." Noah walked onto the stage. He was 9 now, taller, and wearing a tuxedo that actually fit him. He didn't look at the floor. He didn't hide behind my skirt. He walked straight to the piano, bowed awkwardly to the applause, and sat down. There was no tablet in sight, no noise-canceling headphones, just a boy and his father's instrument. He placed his hands on the keys and began to play. It wasn't Twinkle Twinkle anymore. It was a complex, flowing piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune. The notes floated through the room, melancholic yet hopeful, filling the space where grief used to live. As Noah played, my mind drifted to the letter I had received last week from a court-appointed mediator. Jessica had filed for personal bankruptcy after losing the custody battle due to the overwhelming evidence of neglect, and with absolutely no access to the trust fund. Her house of cards had collapsed. The last I heard, she was living in a different state, selling diet shakes on social media to survive. She hadn't called Noah in 3 months. It was a tragedy, yes, but one of her own making. I looked at my grandson. His eyes were closed, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm. He wasn't just surviving, he was flying. The diamonds and the Degas sketches had been sold at auction for a record-breaking sum. But I hadn't bought a yacht or a mansion. I had bought this building. I had created a trust that ensured Noah would never have to worry about a roof over his head, no matter what happened to me. And the rest? I used it to teach other children that broken things still had music inside them. The final chord rang out, lingering in the air like a prayer. The audience erupted into applause. Noah beamed, a genuine, toothy smile that reached his eyes. He looked out into the crowd, found me, and gave me a thumbs up. I wiped a single tear from my cheek. I looked up at the rafters, imagining a familiar presence watching from the wings. "You were right, David," I whispered, my heart full. It wasn't trash. It was the only thing that mattered. Later that night, after the applause had faded and the last guest had gone home, the art center was finally quiet. The only light came from a street lamp outside, casting long, soft shadows across the scarred wood of the Steinway. I walked slowly through the empty hall, my heels clicking softly on the floorboards. I adjusted the blanket over Noah, who had fallen asleep on the green velvet sofa, exhausted but clutching a new sketchbook to his chest. He looked so peaceful now, the frantic rocking in fear replaced by the deep, restorative sleep of a child who knows he is safe. I walked to the piano and ran my hand over the chip in the leg where the movers had dropped it. I didn't want to fix it. It was a reminder. My mother used to have a saying, an old proverb that I hadn't thought about in years. Every cloud has a silver lining, but you have to look up to see it. Jessica had looked at this piano and seen only a cloud of dust and debt. She had looked down, blinded by greed. But David, my son, had looked up. He had seen the silver lining. He had seen the music. And thanks to him, the storm hadn't destroyed us, it had watered the seeds of a new life. I sat down on the bench. I didn't play a song. I just played a single C major chord. It rang out, clear and true, filling the room with warmth. We didn't need the mansion. We didn't need the modern Zen decor. We had this. And it was more than enough. But not every family secret is hidden inside a piano. Sometimes, the truth is burnt to ashes before your very eyes. If you felt satisfied seeing justice served today, you absolutely have to hear the story appearing on your screen right now. Imagine a grieving mother kicked out on Christmas Eve, only to discover her broke, late husband left a secret code in his diary that leads to a hidden vault. You do not want to miss the look on the greedy daughter-in-law's face when the police arrive. Click the video right now to uncover the billion-dollar secret hidden in the ashes.